Welcome everybody to Wall Street Reporter's next Super Stock, a live stream, March 10th, 2021. We are introducing an exciting new company today, and this actually reminds me a lot of similarities between another biotech company we had, which we introduced about a year ago, which was Cytodyne. That stock went from 50 cents to $10. That was a 20x in about a year. So we're going to find out if Tetra is going to be that next, 10 bagger or more. We have Guy Chamberlain, CEO, with us. Guy, welcome to the program.
Well, thank you for having me, Jack, and glad to be your next superstar.
Absolutely. Well, you're not a superstar yet. When you get to 50x, 100x, the stock has to be like $10, $20. Then you can be. Right now, you're still, you're. It's a potential. That's what this is about. We're here to, introduce those companies ground floor, to give investors that ground floor opportunity where they can, get in on that, 10, 20, 100 bagger. So for anybody that's new to our program, our goal is to bring you those stocks which have that 10x to 100x upside potential. So these are companies which are going after multi-billion-dollar market opportunities. They have multiple catalysts in place to ignite that growth, and they're at a key inflection point. I think, look, Tetra, checks off all three of those. You're gonna check out today's video, watch the presentation with Dr. Chamberlain, and then ask your questions after we're done, and then decide for yourself if Tetra is going to be that next 10 bagger or more. So with that said, Guy, welcome again. And I want to ask you, two things real quick. Before we even, I'm going to do things a little bit backwards. So before we even get into, the science and the drug discovery platform, everything else, and, you're going to give us the slideshow. I think we do have a lot of people in the audience who know a little bit about, what you're doing. But the main question I think our audience really has is, okay, the stock is, let's say, 20 cents. Can this be, a $3, $5 stock? And if so, what is the path to get there? What are the milestones I need to accomplish? And again, what are the odds of success of it happening? So,
yeah, well, Jack, for us, obviously, we firmly believe we're at least a $3 to $5 stock, and the reasons for that are very simple. Since 2016, we've been working very hard with the FDA, Health Canada, and other agencies in getting what we call our inhaled cannabis and cannabinoid treatments approved and into clinical trials, which we've been able to achieve some significant milestones. And that's something important because right now, we're after this opioid sparing market. Over 70,000 Americans died in 2019. This went up even by 29% in 2020. So opioid, crisis is not going away in North America. It's a serious issue, but we just got clearance from the FDA for a very important clinical trial. So we're going head-to-head against fast-acting morphine with our drug. And if we're successful, once we launch this trial, we're going to be able to show to the world, basically, that there is a solution out there for opioid sparing. And it's going to be one of our drugs. The second argument why is we have, on the ophthalmic front, we're basically out there. We have U.S. granted patents. They're not pending. They're not applications. They're granted. Same thing in Europe. Same thing in other countries. And we've been studying the ophthalmic drug development for over 12 years. We have a drug that's ready to go into clinicals. We have met with the FDA. They gave us the green light to complete our development plans. And what's important for people to know, uveitis affects Americans very seriously. About 300,000 Americans go blind every year because of uveitis. If you look at just diabetes, the inflammatory condition of the eye of diabetics called diabetic retinopathy, it affects over 7 million Americans and growing rapidly since 2010. So this is another area that we're going to have a major impact. And least, I'll say is what we call our ARDS 003 drug. COVID kind of put a spotlight on sepsis, but sepsis affects 20 million people globally with 11 million deaths each year. Just in the United States, you're looking at 1.5 million people each year that are affected with sepsis. Over 250,000 die each year. 1 out of 3 people hospitalized. Well, this drug, obviously it's protected by our ophthalmic inflammatory patents. We have other patents that protect this, and we finished everything the FDA needed. We're just waiting for obviously the response from the regulators to start a clinical trial. So this is, in our opinion, compared to other companies like GW and all these drugs, if you look at, again, our pain market drug, we're after a basically $58 billion market with the pain drug. Our ophthalmic is a $31 billion one, and the immunomodulator in the sepsis is actually a market potential of $131 billion. So we're not after small, rare disease markets. We're really out there in the race, growing for these billion-dollar markets.
So this is the key thing. Essentially, you're kind of the three markets, the three main markets that your drug, the drugs that are in development are addressing are. I'm just doing the math here. It's about $200 billion total addressable market opportunities.
Correct.
Okay, so massive market opportunities, which is kind of what we like. So I guess the key is going to be like, how far along are you on the path to, where are you in the clinical stage, to getting, how close are you to getting to market, and what are the odds of success?
No, fair question. I mean, for the pain market, this $58 billion potential market that we're after, there we just are getting ready to launch the Reborn trial. And I'll take the Reborn trial because, like I said, it's a very fast trial. One, it's very significant against fast-acting morphine. If we win there, it's going to be a breakthrough therapy, and we're pretty confident on it. And there's scientific reason for why we're confident. But if you look at those trials, it's low cost compared to some longer trials. And that's why we had accelerated this trial. But if you're looking at two pain trials being low cost, very fast because of the design, we can bring this drug to filing the new drug application to the FDA sometime next year, which is very significant. Okay. And obviously that would bring, the appetite for this $58 billion to the market. And if you look at the ophthalmic market, the $31 billion.
Wait, so Guy, I want to ask, okay, so basically, so the bottom line is, so near term, so you can file an NDA within about 12 months, you're saying?
Correct. We've done, the challenge of getting a drug like this one into the market was basically convincing the FDA we could manufacture this type of drug to the standards of a drug. And obviously by them clearing the INDs, actually the second time for the Plenitude trial, they cleared it. That trial is rolling. And now we're getting ready to roll the second trial they cleared. So it's clear that we've had, full commitment from the FDA, buy-in into what we're doing from a manufacturing point of view. So now it's just delivering on the clinical trials.
Okay. Guy, I just realized one thing. I want to get, because I think I just need to adjust the camera a little. We have these slightly to the side, so I got to get just move, or more. Yeah. Just move a little more in that direction. Perfect. Yeah. I just realized when we were talking before, it was so there was a shift. Okay, fantastic. Yeah, because we got to see all of you here. Our audience wants to see all of you. Okay, so. Key takeaway number one, which is I think is very important, and then we're going to dive into you're going to run through your slide deck. We're going to go into all the science because that's really I think, and then we'll have some Q&A. But okay, number one is you have you're about a year away from filing an NDA to get the fast acting morphine alternative into the market, right? That's a $58 billion market. Okay, number one. What about the ophthalmic?
The ophthalmic, that one is we're getting ready to enter into the clinical trial. So, later this year, the FDA obviously is reviewing. It's the same toxicology data as the immunomodulator. So obviously the FDA will get a head start in a sense, although it's not the ophthalmic team that's reviewing it right now. It's the COVID team, but it's the same toxicologist. So they'll see our data. They'll see that it's safe. There are no issues that came up, which is great. The FDA had already given us the validations of our program. So we expect to be getting the clearance from FDA later this year to enter patients. We'll have to choose, obviously, two huge markets between the uveitis and the diabetic retinopathy, both being part of that $31 billion, and both are critical to human care. So, we really need to get this drug into there because these are unmet medical needs.
Okay, and what about and what are you doing in the sepsis market?
The sepsis market, always, for us, this was a very, very, I'd say, aggressive 2020 year. People don't get to see it because you're sitting in the outside of the company. But I can tell you, our staff were beyond, regular hours, weekends, and everybody really gave everything they had so we could get this drug ready for humans. Yeah, there were some delays. I mean, from September, say, to December, we were running over 19, tox studies, and various times that were in parallel. Obviously, we're discovering things scientifically as we move this, so it's a bit of adjustment. Adjustments, but we got all of that cleared. We managed to get all of what we call the manufacturing issues done. Now we're basically just sent everything to regulators, waiting for the verdict, kind of that they agree with us that this drug is safe. And, within the regulatory process, we're expecting, within the, let's say, not to give any guidance to the market, but certainly within the next month or so, we should have certainly feedback from the regulators, and then this trial will begin to move. And this is the sepsis. So you're looking at, major market of $131 billion. So it's a major step for us. And everything has failed. FDA has never approved yet a drug for acute respiratory distress syndrome. So, we're in this race to win.
Okay. So nobody has been able to deliver anything on the market for this. So what? So two things. One is, how does your drug kind of platform work that's different? What makes it unique? And then what's kind of the path? What are the milestones to get this? How far is this from getting to to market?
That's a very good question. I mean, one of the things, a lot of people out there, we've met people that say, okay, cannabinoid receptors, these are new. Nobody really understands them. But keep in mind, our team has published all of this. We've been at this for 12 years studying this space. What's unique about what they call the CB2 receptor, it's on our immune cells. It is these immune cells that actually kind of like they're the orchestra director. So they're the ones who direct the cytokines. And these cytokines are the messengers to cause the inflammation, to say activate it or to shut it down. So our drug doesn't tackle a single messenger because there's multiple messengers in our body. It tackles the orchestra director, so the one that basically can shut down the entire inflammatory signal. We have published data. We've done multiple ways of showing pharmacologists that this receptor is key in managing inflammation. And, obviously this is, for us, why we're confident we're going to win. And a good comparator is the fact that dexamethasone turned out to be a gem for saving patients with COVID. And it's because it was kind of an immunomodulator, and it wasn't targeting a single messenger. Like there were drugs out there, these anti-interleukin 6s. They didn't do that well because they were targeting a single messenger. So that's why we're confident. We're targeting this really top, level of managing this, what they call the storm. Why we're close to the market? Well, if you're in what we call a life-threatening disease, the FDA, for a normal drug approval, not an emergency authorization, but under a normal drug approval for a life-threatening disease, you only need a single pivotal trial. So that's a single phase 2-3 trial. So our path to the market is fast. And you're talking about a life and death. So these are also low-cost trials because, one, it's fast. You don't need scans. You get the drug, you go on the respirator or not, and you survive. So the endpoints are simple to measure. Nothing complex like a cancer trial that's long. You look for survival, lasts for months. Unfortunately, acute respiratory distress syndrome, it's a question of 1 to 2 weeks.
Okay, so the trial, so basically, so this seems like, okay, so the endpoints, everything, the trial, so these should be relatively, nothing is ever simple, but these are relatively simple trials compared to other, let's say cancer drugs, things like that.
Correct. Very, very less complex because it's happening very fast. The other thing people tend to not maybe understand about our business, one of the advantages of this the immunomodulator, which is the same as the ophthalmic drug, is it's a non-regulated cannabinoid. So I don't need to be dealing with the Drug Enforcement Agency. I don't need any import-export permits. That cuts down on time and uncertainty because I don't control the time it takes for the DA to issue a permit or even Health Canada to issue an import permit. So I can move this drug at a predictable level. Whereas when you're talking about cannabis or a cannabinoid that's regulated like THC, I'm at the mercy of these agencies to stick to their, to their policies of when they'll deliver a permit. So there's some uncertainty in the other drugs and a complexity of moving them, whereas this one has no complexities.
So let's assuming everything goes well, potentially when, what's the path to market? When can you be on the
Same
market?
type of thing. We're looking at sometime in a year, basically in 2022, we'd be looking at filing a new drug application. If, for some reason we can, get fast access because we're, how can I say, a proof of concept in COVID patients, for example, shows very promising results. Yes, we'll make it available through the emergency authorization like other companies, but that to me is not a full drug approval. I mean, people don't necessarily understand the difference between an emergency authorization and a drug approval, but obviously ethically we would make this drug available through that path. So we could have, revenues coming in sooner in say early 2022 type of thing, but the full drug approval under the standard life-threatening path is still fast with a single pivotal trial.
Okay, so the key takeaway, this is, is you're going to have potentially, I mean, again, anything can happen, but, a year from now, 12 months from now, 2022, you could have, 2 drugs on the market addressing, essentially 150, these 2 are, I don't know, $200 billion potential markets.
Oh, you're looking at close to 200 billion alone. I mean, it's these two because this market is growing every year and it's not going down.
Okay, so Guy, now I think everybody who's watching this, I think they're interested. They want to know, what are you doing? What's the science behind this? So with that said, what I'd like you to do is I'm going to turn it over to your slide. You're going to run some slides, which are going to go through all the details. And I'm going to come back as soon as you're done. We'll open up for audience Q&A. I see we've got a lot of questions coming in, so it's going to be interesting. Okay, Guy, let me just put this on the screen here. Okay, we got it on the screen. And okay, take it away.
All right. I'll skip the forward-looking statements. So corporate profile, we're basically a biopharmaceutical company with a pipeline of cannabinoid drugs. Obviously, we in let's say after 2022, when we get these drugs filed, we needed the future. So we have a partnership to feed us other molecules that are always screened by discovery. It takes 5 years to, let's say, get a drug to be ready even to go into toxicology. So that's key for long-term survival of any biotech company. One key message about who we are, both our executive and operational teams are experienced in drug development. We don't use outside consultants. This is our core expertise. Our focus is basically 2 areas. Immunomodulation, which includes the ophthalmic and things like sepsis and uveitis, which is obviously part of the immunomodulation, and pain management. And this is basically who we are. We're after major markets, like we said, the $132 billion in 2015, growing rapidly with the cytokine type conditions. The ophthalmic markets with a potential market size of $32 billion, and our pain indications with market sizes of 58 and growing to be by 2023 at 77 billion. So not insignificant. A key importance to any biotech, we have granted patents. So our inhalation, we've been able since 2016, we've been studying cannabinoid, let's say chemistry and their properties of being inhaled from particle size, name it. It's led us to file patent applications for inhaled cannabinoids, including composition of matter. For our sepsis, cytokine storms, even COVID, we have 2 PCT patent applications. That includes manufacturing, purification, and composition and use of nanoemulsions for cannabinoids. Our ocular formulations, very solid patents there. They've been granted in the US, granted in Europe, and now granted in Australia. And this includes basically composition of matter. Very different from those that are working in eye pressure and in glaucoma. We're targeting pain and inflammation. One of the rare companies doing this. We also license patents. So obviously we license to be able to commercially scale up our cannabinoid production. We also have for sustained delivery through the buccal membrane. And we also go after things like abuse deterrence, obviously to address some scheduling with the DA for some of the drugs. Our immunomodulator, this molecule is the same one that is used in both drugs. So when we move on our, let's say, immunomodulator sepsis asset, the ARDS-003, we actually move, same thing on the manufacturing side with the ophthalmic. So they move in parallel. What's important, it's a very, very selective drug for what we call a CB2 receptor. So it's very potent compared to CBD, much more powerful as an anti-inflammatory, but it's also selective for this receptor. That's key for safety, because this means you don't have any what we call off-target binding to other receptors. So it's very selective, so we get a very clean profile. That's important because when you're developing a drug for eye diseases, for example, going after that $31 billion market potential, that's going to be a key asset to this drug. Same thing if I'm injecting it into people trying to save lives. We don't want any off-target side effects in these patients. We want the physician to be able to focus, get the response, squash down the hyperinflammatory reaction, and save the person's lives. That's what we're looking at. Let's take a look at a bit of our data. Keep in mind, all of this is public. This has been presented in peer-reviewed journal for the last 12 years. This is our attacking this $132 billion market. Although I'm talking about sepsis here, you're looking at significant reduction in major of these cytokines, those inflammatory messengers I messaged about. Keep in mind, cannabinoids cross the blood-brain barrier, so they get to the brain. So we can go after any inflammatory condition actually with this drug. So as an immunomodulator, even though we're focusing on sepsis right now, let's keep in mind that $132 billion market is a huge potential for this drug, because once we have a success in one indication in humans, we can branch out to other indications as well. Just to let people know, one of the things we discovered, because these messengers, the role of the immune cell with the CB2 receptor goes beyond just the inflammatory process. It goes into the fibrosis. We've all been hearing about, people who stay too long on a ventilator end up developing pulmonary fibrosis. Well, we were able to show that our drug also can reduce this potential in humans. So our drug will also potentially have post-ARDS, acute respiratory distress syndrome, care in these patients. Ocular health, like I said, $31 billion market, but look at the global cost of vision loss, over $3 trillion, with over 22 million people living with vision impairment or blindness. This is a major market, and there's a huge potential. Some companies like Ocular Therapeutics are worth $1.5 billion developing drugs for these markets, so there's a huge potential for our drug, granted patents, so we have a safe path to the market and major protection. One thing that's really significant here, and we've all heard about it, the dexamethasone. This was a study to show that how our drug basically acts on this CB2 receptor, the let's say the director of that orchestra for the messengers. So you're looking at the light blue, that's our drug, HU308. So you're seeing that it remained very, very inhibited, so very low compared to dexamethasone being that yellow. So initially dexamethasone in these animal models had a nice response, but over time you lost the effect, whereas we maintained our effect with our drug. And our drug's not immunosuppressive, it's immunomodulator. So it's very safe to use compared to these other drugs. Pain management, that $58 billion growing to $77 billion market. Well, inhaled is obviously, we've been able to show to the regulators. When we did a metabolism study in humans, we were able to show that we don't produce a lot of that 7-carboxy-CBD, the infamous metabolite from CBD that's suspected to be involved with the liver-induced toxicity. So we have a safer profile in oral. Think about it. The argument that cannabis users have been claiming for smoking cannabis to get relief from fentanyl and other morphines has always been by smoking or an inhaled route. It's never been the oral route. So we have a higher delivery to the body, very, very fast. Look at the curve, those nice spikes on the left is our drug by inhalation, and what you're seeing in the little box in the middle is from oral or from sublingual from Satidex. So you're seeing a very low peak in the blood compared to what we deliver. So we have very rapid onset, which is key to relieving anybody who's suffering from acute major pain, very low impact on cognitive function. So that's key to ensuring that the patient can function. And obviously, FDA found the quality of our drug and everything to be favorable to even go after other indications, second or third line indications for pain management. Basically bring back to people this major trial that's about to start. It's going to be key, the outcome of this trial. It's open label, yes. It's a crossover design because we need this data to sit back down with regulators, and if they see what we know we're confident of showing in patients, which is that this drug is significantly faster than fast-acting morphine, then we're going to be discussing a breakthrough therapy with the regulators. And next 6 months, if I'm conservative, obviously the launch of the clinical trials in humans for sepsis, COVID. So you're seeing those trials. Obviously, we're in the regulatory process right now. We have all of our data. Regulators are looking at our data. On the quick sleeve comms front, it's the launch of the Reborn that we said, that infamous drug for fast pain relief, that $58 billion. We'll get some of that data. It's obviously open label, so we'll be seeing it as it goes on. And then on the ophthalmic front, going after that $31 billion drug market. So we're looking at obviously getting the clearance for the trials in humans. So that's what's coming up conservatively over the next 6 months. And that's it for Jack.
Okay, Guy, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, fantastic. All right, so that was great. I mean, that pretty much covered, the whole story. I mean, the milestones coming up, the market opportunities. So let's jump into some audience questions. Let's see here. Okay, let's see what we got here. The first question is okay. Okay, so Shafin is asking, where do you see the company? I guess what's the focus for the next 6 months is going to be what? These trials, yeah?
Yeah, so the focus for the next 6 months, obviously we always move one drug as a priority, which is the immunomodulator, the sepsis drug. So we're launching that phase 1 trial and obviously getting a patient trial, a proof of concept right away, because that's key. I mean, I want to show to the world that I can go after part of that $132 billion market. So I want some patient data within the next 6 months. I can show the world the potential of my drug. And it's, like I said, patented, so it's ours, and we have full protection. Okay. And the Reborn is the second priority, and that to me is really, they're kind of both important, but obviously for me to show that I can beat, the pants off of fast-acting morphine is key. If I was a physician and I would see that, or even a patient with breakthrough pain, I would want this drug in tomorrow. I wouldn't want to wait.
Okay. Fabian is asking, okay, so multiple questions. The current share structure, percentage owned by insiders, the cash position, the burn rate, and are you looking to raise any financing in near term?
Near term, no. We just finished obviously doing a financing, and doing the financing, there's obviously a lot of challenges with that, plus and minuses. But as a biotech company with no revenues, I cannot afford to slow down my operations. And when I'm building value, so every month that I would lose, I'm losing value. That's key. When I started back in 1995 in pharma, my first boss would always drill in our heads, every day you slow down, Guy, you're making me lose 1 million of sales per day. He says, think about that. I'm sure that number is much bigger today. So we're talking about 1995 as $1 million, but that's the message. And if I slow down, I'm going to lose money. And that's the way we have to think. So for us, we're not planning to, and we have sufficient funds to deliver the milestones you're seeing. We put that in the prospectus, very transparent about that. The insiders, I think it's about a total of 12%. We have a major, licensed producer came in, I think it was back in 2017. They got in for $1 million when we were at about $1.03 back then. Trading, that showed significant confidence in our vision and our plan of bringing cannabis drugs to the market. This was Afria. So I think, they haven't left. They still own the stock. So it shows, in my opinion, great confidence in the market by this supplier of ours.
Okay. Okay, we got a question for sepsis. What is the advantage of this drug over antibiotics? Are you looking to fight against the antibiotic market or add to it?
Well, actually, these would be given with antibiotic or any antiviral. That's an immunomodulator is working on the inflammation. Just like people who were dying of COVID were not dying, say, from the virus. We're dying from the inflammation. Same thing in bacterial sepsis. Bacterial sepsis is basically your immune system that's basically too tired to act. So it kind of shuts down, and then you die from a secondary infection because your system can't fight it anymore. So you will help. So it's not attacking the antibiotic market. It could be used with any antibiotic, any antiviral. So it's really the immunomodulator market, which does not include antibacterial or antiviral drugs.
Okay, so I guess to revisit the previous question, so how much cash on hand right now after the raise, and what's the burn rate?
Our burn rate, we've been pretty transparent. Usually at the annual general assembly with shareholders, I go over that burn rate. Typical burn rate that we'll have varies from, say, 1.5 to 2 million a month. It can go up to 3 depending on the number of patients I have, say, in a clinical trial during a month. So let's say, in fairness, it can cycle anywhere from 1.5 to 3 billion. Obviously, the CFO and I, on a weekly basis, review our burn to be sure we're as, how can I say, as conservative as possible. And obviously, our key is ensuring that we drive our trials. That's our key. But all the rest is, if it's non-essential, obviously we're not going there. Just from a building point of view, we don't own any buildings. We still, rent a facility for office, and our manufacturing site for our clinicals, for our pain drugs. It's a rented facility as well in New Brunswick, and the rest is contracted out. But the key expertise, that's in-house.
Okay. So assuming as you move up the milestones, generally, the stock would move up, as you get close, as you hit milestones. So, if you need to raise money, would be at probably a higher price point, if everything works out.
Yes. I think a lot of it has to do with people have never understood us. We've tried for years multiple methods of doing, investor relations, obviously from our share price, not successfully. We've tried the classical methods. The problem I think we had is we weren't getting out to our shareholders. We don't have an institutional base, we have a retail base, so we need to speak to the shareholders. In a sense, we're kind of like politicians. We have to speak to the people who all vote us in. So I think that's a good comparison.
Knock on doors. Yeah. Okay. Wow. So let's see. Let's get into. Oh, yeah. I have a question. What is it that I guess the company has been misunderstood? Because I think some investors, they don't know which kind of basket to put you in. Is this a cannabis stock? Is it a biotech stock? Like what is like what's what is it that you think investors are missing? What is it that they don't quite understand about Tetra, that if they did understand it, the stock would be trading at above $1 right now?
To me, that's probably the key question. And I've lived it. I've pitched to healthcare analysts. I've pitched to even cannabis analysts, to brokers, name them. And prior, I'd say, to the GW acquisition for $7.2 billion by Jazz, people didn't really understand that people working, say, on a cannabinoid or a cannabis drug, actually that there was a market. They only saw what we call the medical cannabis market or the recreational markets out there, and people were looking for revenues. Well, if I'm a biotech, I don't have revenues, and you're not really going to see that from what I'm presenting here. I'm after the billion-dollar markets, not this small retail markets. So that, I think a lot of people that may have come in, especially maybe when they saw Afria come into our stock, they might have thought, okay, this is going to be another cannabis type company, because a lot of companies were not admitting really what they were doing initially. So I think some of our retail base that's been with us, we're hoping that they'd see us make a move in, let's say, the wellness markets with cannabis type products, but they're not going to see that. We're after a pure pharma play. And I think that's been the message that's been hard. And I tell you, it's not just the retail. I've met brokers that never looked at our presentation because they saw Tetra Bio-Pharma, they associated us with the cannabis market, and they never opened the deck. And the pharma analysts are tough. They looked at it and they never thought the cannabinoid receptor had anything to do in life, till obviously they met our scientists. We prepared some position papers. We showed them that the CB receptor is actually involved in medicine, with 12 years. And what they want to see is, we did what we call knockout models. So you kind of remove the receptor, say, from the animal's body, and then you show the impact. Put it back, show how you can block it, and do the classic pharmacology studies. We had all that data with what they want to see, also dose response. well, we're making ground with these analysts, but I think the biggest movement in our favor is the acquisition of GW for $7.2 billion. Go back to 2009 or 2010. Try and find what GW was trading at just before Sativex got approved. Keep in mind, Sativex is approved for a very, very small market size compared to my $58 billion pain market. If you even look at Zynerba has never traded below $4 billion for US dollars. If you go back to 2016, they had a topical CBD, what they call a transdermal gel. They were trading over, I think, $8. And this is just a simple CBD topical drug, and they had completed some phase 1 trials. We've completed major phase 1 trials to prove the pharmacodynamics, the safety of our pain drug. And so I think if you look at and you don't understand us, yeah, you can probably see that there's no value. But if you dig in to the values of these companies before these, so think of it. Look at GW's growth, 2010, its share price, its market cap, how it grew 2010, 2012, 2013. You'll get the picture. So if I'm saying that I'm finishing this drug development, filing my NDAs in 2022, I think it's a great time to buy.
Okay, so I think essentially so maybe there's this kind of the market is the institutional market kind of sees you as maybe it's like a cannabis thing. It's not a pharma, because if you were a biopharma, then the stock would be probably a couple bucks right now, just purely based on that perception.
Yes,
based on where you are right now in terms of with the milestones. So
there's a lot of prejudice out there. I mean, we've seen it firsthand. We do government relations. We like I said, the fact that a lot of people, let's say, pharmaceutical healthcare analysts really thought the cannabinoid receptor was nothing but hype. So they hadn't read the science. We had Dr. Mel Kelly, who's been at this cannabinoid receptor. She's probably one of the top 5 pharmacologists in the world in this space. She does research for a lot of big pharmas when she was a university professor in this space, and she's published a lot. And it took her to basically prove to them that this receptor does have a role to do with medicine. So again, seeing GW being acquired probably sent them a very nice bucket of cold ice on their head, saying, "Hey guys, there is a value of this on the market. It's not that there isn't one." So I think that's going to be the eye opener, the impact of Jazz's acquisition of GW.
Yeah. So with that said, now you're getting you're kind of approaching let's say again, assuming everything goes well with the trials. You could potentially have your drug on the market next year, 2022. Do you have any licensing, any partnerships to get the drug on the market, or like what's anybody that you're speaking with right now?
Well, the first ones, I think the biggest and interesting one that came actually for the comms was really a big pharmaceutical company, but in Mexico. I think they really saw the potential of this drug very fast. We were very happy. They even got, how can I say, they even offered to participate and pay for the sites of the comms clinical trials in their country, which shows how can I say, interested they were. If you're talking about a big pharma, and the big pharma, the complexity of moving a drug like QuickSleep or comms is hard. People don't understand that. Go back and listen to the presentation of the government affairs person of GW Pharma. It took them 13 years to move Epidiolex through clinical trials. It was what we call a single, say, IND type filing per patient in the USA. Very complex. And dealing with the DA, dealing with states, dealing with all that. So it's not just like, okay, tomorrow morning I'm going to do my ARDS drug. Like I said, it's not control. Tomorrow morning when I start a trial, say, in New York City, I basically call FedEx, pick up my drug, deliver it. Don't worry about the border. Don't worry about anything. Whereas I can't do that with comms. I can't do that with QuickSleep. It can't leave Canada until Health Canada gives me the export permit. To get the export permit, I have to get the DA to give me an import permit. That's easy in our case because it's the FDA that basically instructs the DA to do that. But this whole complexity that you have to have an even stronger, say, regulatory team to deal with now, not just FDA, but with local officials, with state officials, and with the DA adds to the complexity and to them to the risk, and obviously to an uncertainty in time, because I can tell you I'm shipping this month and maybe Health Canada will unfortunately take an extra 2 weeks. I don't control that. Whereas a normal synthetic drug or even a biologic, I know to basically, the day exactly my timelines. So I think that has kept a lot of the big pharmas away from working with any of these, scheduled drugs in this case. The day we get positive interim data on any pivotal trial, I think that will change. Now, I think with Jazz making a move, I think a lot of these companies are going to begin looking at us.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, so I think the acquisition of GW Pharma by Jazz, I mean, that kind of creates a precedent in the market. What are the what's I guess do you see any other any other drug development companies that cannabinoid development companies that might be bought out by like a big pharma in the next 6 months? Because that would be a good catalyst for igniting the value in TBP.
Well, I think the companies, I mean, as much as you look at the success of some other companies, a lot of them are in what we call rare diseases, so we go after the orphan drugs. That's nice. I mean, many biotechs in my career, we always try to get some of these orphan, designations by FDA. We have 5 of them. We're confident we'll get others as well. But for me, when I see the sizes of these, like you're saying, over $200 billion US potential markets, why would I limit myself to this small market size? So for me, that when I look at these other companies, I say, okay, somebody can make a move, but I think the one that's going to be a game changer is going to be, yes, my ophthalmics, and I'll tell you why. Look at Roche. Look at some of the other big pharmas. They've been working on the CB receptor in developing ocular drugs for years. So I think when they start to see us getting into patients, that's going to be a game changer, because they're going to say, okay, this is in my area of drug development. And they're going to probably want to look at the drug, look at our data. And, they'll obviously, like I said, that'll be a game changer. Getting fast proof of concept data in humans is the key to getting these pharmas to the table. Prior to that, I don't want to say a promise. It's just preclinical data with the known risks of any model in predicting your success, in humans. And in the case of the ARDS 003, that one I think is going to move faster, because now that we've shown we have clean toxicology, we can inject this intravenous. That's the highest bar. This is a sterile injectable drug. So this is the highest bar for any drug development compared to an oral, compared to an inhalation. Very challenging. We've achieved it. And this drug is very selective for receptor. Like I said, very low off target. That's key from a safety point of view. We've obviously shown to the regulators that we don't have the metabolism issues that GW Pharma had with Epidiolex that was raised by the FDA reviewers. So, we've crossed those, let's say, T's. They're all crossed off now. And I think even the big pharmas watch that. Sometimes we do news releases, not for our shareholders, but to educate the pharmas out there of what our achievements are.
Okay, so Errol's asking, what is, so what's your confidence level that the FDA will approve this? I mean, I guess the two, the ophthalmic and also the what do you call and what are the potential pitfalls? Like, I mean, I guess he's asking, what are the odds percentage?
Well, in my career, I mean, obviously most drugs that have failed into entering a phase 1 trial, for example, have failed because of their toxicology. I've been doing this since 1995. This drug had a very clean safety profile. We were able to defend the proposed doses based on safety, the classical. One of the challenges you get into, which is what GW got into with this toxicology, is they discovered that, say, humans didn't metabolize CBD like rats, mice, or dogs. So that creates an issue, because then your models and animals can't predict safety in humans. In the case of our HU308, the molecule that's in the ARDS drug, well, it's the same metabolism. There's no major differences, say, between humans, rats, monkeys, dogs. So our animal data can actually predict what will happen. And that's key. If you're an FDA reviewer or a Health Canada reviewer, you're going to say, I'm allowing this. If somebody dies, somebody may want to take my head off type of thing in the wrong decision. So if you can't make that safe prediction that what the company's pitching is true, then you're going to be nervous about it. In my career, I've taken obviously some, let's say, much less safe drugs into humans successfully. So this to me is, I think we can be very confident that we will get the green light to go. And, we've made major achievements. Go back, look at QuickSleep. November 2019, we got the FDA's clearance for the Plenitude trial. We had conversations with the FDA. Yes, they were concerned after the GW data on Epidiolex about liver toxicity. So we had to build in some what we call stopping rules to protect patients, look at liver function, even though we tell them historically, people have never seen this liver toxicity by inhalation, and we have never seen it in our phase 1. In the case of Reborn, we have done throughout the year of 2020, we finished our human metabolism trial. So we showed the FDA that the metabolism by inhalation is very different than by oral, which explained the safety of this. And we had no interactions with the regulator. Basically, the Reborn trial went into what we call into effect on the 30th days as per the regulations, which for us is a sign that we've done great progress in educating the regulator of our science and how safe our molecule is, and how, from a quality point of view, because the regulator also views safety from a quality point of view. If my drug is not GMP, if it's not manufactured to the same standard of others, there's a risk. So that silence that led to the approval of Reborn, that's for us, for me and my team, it's a great sign of, of progress, and, congratulations by the FDA. You've now have done the science required to convince us.
Okay, let's get in. Okay, so a couple more questions coming in. So the sepsis, so your sepsis, how does it compare to what else is on the market? You see the question, right, from Marcel?
Well, for me, I'd say compared to dexamethasone. I get that question, kind of often. And for us, our scientific team was excited when the first trial with dexamethasone and COVID patients came out. And, I was curious to listen to these because, two of our experts are anesthesiologists that do research. One of them is actually a sepsis, specialist, and the other one is an airway management specialist. And this is what we're talking about in acute respiratory, distress in patients. And what was really key is he's saying, look, he says, dexamethasone acts in a sense, different mechanism, but it's doing the same thing. It's working on that director of the orchestra. It's shutting down the messengers that stimulate the inflammation. So he says, this is kind of supportive evidence that our drug has a great chance of working in humans. We had shown in animals that we were better. Now, keep in mind, dexamethasone is used at, they drop the clinical dose to use what we call a non-immunosuppressive dose in their patients. Ours is not immunosuppressive, so you could give it to any patient in, that was a diabetic, etc., in the COVID, treatment scenario. We could give it actually in combination even with dexamethasone. And now with the prevention of fibrosis, you can give it much longer to help prevent the formation of any fibrotic, event in patients, whereas you can't do that with dexamethasone.
Okay, let me just gonna pop back to the question here. Okay, we got. Sorry, I gotta scroll through back to the questions here. Okay, here we go. You see the question on the screen?
No, I'd have to remove my.
Okay. So here we got to remove this. Okay, so we'll. Okay. Can you see the questions now?
I'll just move that. Okay.
Okay, yeah, because we got a bunch of questions. We got a bunch of questions popping on the screen. So Gene is asking. I guess there's no side effects with you.
There's no side effects. Typical of when we propose to go in combination, say with another drug into humans in a trial. So in this case, for us, the FDA has asked us to allow antivirals in our drugs. So obviously, we have to address the safety of giving this drug in combination. Again, this is where receptor type studies are important. Why I stressed out the importance that this was a highly selective drug for the CD2 receptor. We have actually 98.3% affinity for that receptor with low, what we call off target. So we're not working on some of the other receptors. And that's important, because if I want to give it with another drug, I don't want to act on the other drug's receptor, where I'll kind of boost the effect of the other drug. So that's how we can actually start to answer, those types of questions to regulators and even to an ethics review board. If I present this to any hospital, be it Harvard, UCLA, they're going to ask me the question: is this safe for my patients? They're not going to care what the FDA said. They want to see the data themselves, and because they have to ensure the safety of their patients.
Okay, so Gene is asking, is Alzheimer's on your list with this drug?
That's a good question. I've gotten that question several times, even through Facebook. I've seen it. I would say yes, and a simple reason: cannabinoids are what we call fat-soluble molecules. So they can cross the blood-brain barrier on their own. So they can get to the brain on their own. This is an anti-inflammatory drug. So if there is an inflammatory mechanism in Alzheimer, which there is a part of it, then obviously this will be able to help patients with many conditions of, of the CNS that involve inflammation.
Okay, we got a couple of people asking about the burn rate. They're saying they're concerned about the burn rate. How would you answer that?
Well, our burn rate, we've been clear about it. It varies, like I said, between 1.5 million to 2 million. That's basically where it's been last year. And to lower it, we can't. There's a cost to our trials. We're doing regulated trials, so these involve GCP operations, GMP operations, and there's a cost to them. If we cut on the GCP operations, cut on the GMP operations, well, one, cutting on both, the FDA won't approve our trials. And two, if I make it to the new drug application stage, the inspectorate, so the group that do clinical trial inspections, the FDA's inspection team for even GMP, they'll basically invalidate all of our work and shut down and reject the drugs, which you don't want. Last thing you want to be is in front of the FDA with a $132 billion potential drug and be told, hey guys, you were slack on your compliance, so sorry, your drug's non-approvable. I don't think that would be fair to any shareholders. Our burn is our burn. And people compare us to some of what they call those, I've heard this question a lot, the observational studies. Yes, but this company's doing an observational study. Well, an observational study in the pharma world is equivalent to rat data. It has no marketing potential in front of a regulator because it's not a controlled study. So it's not even accepted as evidence for drug development. It can be used for post-marketing, to help penetrate a drug in the market. But in the drug development world, forget it.
Okay, Guy. So, for anybody that's kind of new to the story, can you talk a little bit about your background and some of the other key players on the team?
Sure. So my background, I'll explain it very simply. Obviously, I have a PhD in Pharm Tox. Started my career in 1995 developing complex drugs. Why complex drugs? Well, basically because I had a toxicology background, so you end up in the drug safety teams first, and developed a specialty into convincing regulators that I would bring a safe drug into clinical trials. So my expertise is really getting the science, matching the regulations, modifying, the regulatory path, pitching it to a regulator, getting their buy-in, negotiating with them, and then taking the drug through the various steps. That's what I do. On my team, we have Graham Wood. He came in from actually Alpha Sciences. I had worked with him actually at NBS Pharma Services. He's a clinical drug developer. For us, that was key. He's actually an inhalation drug developer specialty. So now you see the importance of his role in our trials like our Reborn trial, but also in helping our whole clinical team in managing our drugs. And you need that. And that was key too, because the chief operating officer has to free me up from watching things so I can spend time with my shareholders on the Wall Street Reporter and other, IR events. Our CFO comes from Acasti, so obviously we'd like to grow up and be on the NASDAQ in the near future. So we needed somebody with that experience. Our chief commercial officer spent over 30-something years in big pharma from Merck, branding drugs, launching new drugs. That's key. We needed that expertise to come in. And, people don't consider this, but when I'm designing my pivotal trials, he's going to have to sell it, or a partner is going to have to sell it. But keep in mind, if I give you my drug to sell, your Merck Frost, for example, and I've not prepared any of the key opinion leaders, they're more part of my trials. you're going to have to do all that work after the approval, which means I'm not seeing any royalties from sales coming in now. So early on, guys like Steve are working with our clinical group to get this mentality that we identify right away who are the physicians that will influence the prescribing of our drugs. Get these guys or gals involved in our clinical trials, get the advisory boards moving, and get this opinion. And, you know, this is kind of the team. And then if you look at our compliance, so we have Uffer, who's in our team. He's been managing VP of our compliance, which includes responsible for GMP, GLP, and GCP, convincing regulators that we do everything as per, you know, the standards of a drug company. We pass, you know, regularly inspections from Health Canada to keep our drug establishment license. That's the GMP license. We need that to get what we call the cannabis drug license. So I could not even manipulate THC or CBD if I did not have both licenses. So that's key to our survival. That we achieve. And, you know, and then basically, you know, we have our chief scientific officer that I told you about, Dr. Melanie Kelly, 30 years, professor at Dalhousie, very, very knowledgeable in the CB receptors. One of the key, like I said, probably top 5 scientists in this space. And she's published a lot, so people can search her name. And that's basically our team. And even our VP clinical, so our next level, we have people that come from pharma, so they're not learning. They've done this before. And that's what we look for. An entire team of people who've done it before. We don't have time to learn.
Okay. Question here. Any update on the George Mason University study?
Not yet. So obviously we're expecting to have an update in, you know, in the near future of these studies. So, I mean, that's obviously, how would I say, we'll obviously make it available to all the shareholders through probably a news release the day that data's out, because everybody's obviously going to be as curious as us to see how this drug behaves in an animal model. What was the challenge for George Mason University is obviously that they had to develop a model for this. Although they were using COVID, you know, infection models to study vaccines and study antivirals, what we were looking for is a bit of a different signal. We actually wanted to see what's happening to the lung, because we're after the hyperinflammation in the lungs. So they had to tweak their model to be able to have the animals say that survived long enough so we can have a look histologically what's happening in the lungs. That for us is a key answer.
Okay, Guy. So let's kind of, I guess, like let's kind of wrap up here. You got a number of so the key milestones coming up right now. Let's call it the next 90 days. Is that
Sure,
I think
90 days, yeah.
So what kind of news flow can investors expect next 90 days?
To what's known in the public domain, what's been released by us through our, you know, recent prospective and our what we call the MD&A. You'll see obviously the phase 1 in humans for the immunomodulator, the ARDS. And like I said, getting a proof of concept study in humans, for me, it's key to prove to people that I can get after part of that $132 billion market. Then the other one, the Reborn, we obviously announced end of January, FDA had cleared it. It's obviously now getting that trial up and running. So they'll eventually get news on that trial running. That's an open label study. So it'd be up to us to decide when we'll start to reveal some of the results. So it's not blinded. So we can do that when we want. Sometimes we don't want to for various reasons. We also have to be careful, because if I start to reveal too much data, the FDA may view that I'm using that to enroll patients or excite patients. I can get slapped. So we'll have to be careful how. So my clinical group will certainly keep me well behaved on that aspect, so I don't do any violations. And then I'd say on the ophthalmic front, we'll be obviously going back to the regulator to be sure we can get that clearance to start an ophthalmic trial. So going after my $200 billion something market.
Okay, so Gene's asking, did some of your team work with the father of the endocannabinoid system, Dr. Raphael Mechoulam?
Yeah, Dr. Mechoulam. I mean, that's a historical question actually for Tetra. If you ask Dr. Kelly or even our chairman, Bill, you would probably get an interesting answer, because we acquired Panag Pharma in May 2019, and Panag Pharma, he was actually on their advisory board. So he was the inventor of the HU308 molecule, and he continued to provide scientific guidance until Tetra acquired basically PanAg in 2019. So yes, there's a good relationship between the PanAg research team and this team. It is a small world.
Okay, and he's got a follow-up question. Update on the PPP 001.
Yeah, that's a part of our commercial. So yes, we announced that deal. So now they're finalizing, obviously, the definite agreement of trying to get the Anjuka and PP01 distributed into those parts of Europe. That I haven't talked much about that because that's part of our commercial operation. But yes, we're after trying to get revenues this year from the sale of some THC-based drugs, though. And obviously, I think it's, as a company, people obviously always looking at our burn, saying, okay, you're just a pure biotech. The revenues from a prescription drug are, not tomorrow morning. So one of the things we've been looking at is offsetting maybe our costs. We're more advanced than probably any other company in the sense of inhaling any cannabinoid product. We're seeing many companies position themselves for the wellness, what they call the wellness market in the USA. Where we have intellectual property, we have human data. We'd probably be interested in talking to companies and even, getting out there and say, okay, you want to license some of our technology for your market? We'd be interested in the royalty base. Those are things we'll certainly look at, discuss at the board level. And I think that, to me, could begin a path to offset some of our, of our burn and hopefully comfort our shareholders that we're doing everything in our power to keep, in a sense, not the burn down, because I have to keep the burn up, that's my job, but to kind of offset it with some revenues coming in from royalties.
Is there a plan to move Anjuka into the Canadian market?
Okay, that's from Justin. Yes, there is. That's the reason we created the Anjuka. We know patients are very interested in getting the Anjuka product. And if you were a physician, I'd say you're also be interested in getting it because of all the clinical data we have. Contrary to some of the cannabis industry, we actually have done, regulated drug development type trials. So we have all the safety information, metabolism, pharmacokinetics, pharmacodynamics, and obviously would have a very in-depth package for physicians to push these products to them, especially for patients. For us, we got concerned when we saw that many companies were pulling out of the medical cannabis market because we felt that, okay, patients need access to these, even though, they're not prescription drugs yet.
Okay. Okay. So things. So right now, I think it looks like the company is kind of at this inflection point where we're going to see some some things happening in the next couple of months here. You're approaching potential commercialization a year out, roughly, right? And two products which address
on the prescription drug front, correct. We'd be looking at filing what we call the new drug applications, in 2022. In the case of life-threatening ones, obviously we can go after emergency drug paths to get them already available to patients. That's a question of your GMP. So if you look at with our Canadian drug establishment license, well, obviously Health Canada will know it is GMP because they obviously inspect us. That's key. That's also key to getting the drug approval, because if they deem that you do not have the compliance of the GMP, you will not get your DIN, no matter how successful your drug trials were. And that's key for shareholders to understand. There's a cost to my business that doesn't exist in, let's say, the medical cannabis market. If I am not compliant with GCP, the good clinical practices, not compliant with the good manufacturing practices, it's game over. Just like in Monopoly, go back to square one and begin again. That's the game we're in.
Okay. Okay. So Guy, let's wrap up. Last question, which we always ask every CEO on a program. In your opinion, like right now, what would you say the top 3 reasons why investors should consider Tetra stock today?
For me, the key thing is Tetra has done everything, let's say, by the book. We've worked hand in hand with regulators. We started working with the FDA in 2016. We've been transparent with them. We've done what they wanted. Now, I've had the question come from some people say, how did you get Reborn and Plenitude approved by the FDA as a drug registration trial? And the answer, I said, is very simple. If I did not do what they wanted, do you think they would have approved it? And the answer is obviously no. So obviously Tetra has been delivering what the regulator wants to see. That's key. Because if you want to invest into a biotech, you don't want to invest into a biotech that's not playing by the rules. Because if you're not playing by the rules, you're going to discover the brick wall very fast. That's key. The second one is obviously our science. We've shown that repeatedly. Our science is very good. We've been able to get our drugs into clinical trials. We've been able to get our data into peer-reviewed journals that are published. And we've gotten drugs into phase 2 trials. We have drugs into phase 2 trials. And that's a key marker, which if you look at the valuation of a company that's alone in a phase 2 trial, we're undervalued from that point of view. And then obviously we achieve major protections from the FDA, from orphan drugs designations. We have solid intellectual property that's granted, so it's not pending. So it's not like a big pharma has to, take the risk that the patent may get rejected. And that's not going to go away. The value associated to these patents with these drugs are not going to go away no matter what my share price is.
Yeah, it's interesting. So in terms of comps, right? So I mean, the valuation of Tetra right now is, I don't know, it's about 60 million. Let's call it somewhere. It's bouncing in that range. Generally speaking, like in your peers, like companies in the kind of in the space with phase 2 trials, what should the value be?
Well, way back, I think
especially based on the market size of the markets you're addressing these phases.
Based on the markets we're addressing, which should definitely be over $3, I'd certainly target more of a $5 type of stock. We don't have a single drug, so I mean, that's something that people need to understand as well. In pharma, we look at a molecule. So that HU308 molecule, for example, when we were moving it from discovery, trying to get it into phase 1 stage where it is today, it had a chance of 1 out of 1,000 to make it. It has made it. That's a major achievement. That should show on my share price. It doesn't show. Then once it's in humans, it has a chance of 1 in 5 of making it to the market. In the case of my inhaled drug, it had maybe a lower chance of getting into humans because it was, say, from cannabis. So obviously from a regulatory point of view, I could piggyback on the fact that people were consuming cannabis from a safety point of view and argue that. So you can say, okay, that doesn't work. But once I was in humans for my reborn and my plenitude, I have now less than a 1 in 5% chance of making it to the market. If you look at my ophthalmic, same game. I'm at that stage. I'm going into humans. Again, I have that 1 in 5 chance of getting to the market. And that one faced also the 1 out of 1,000 risk. And that's important. So if you look at Tetra, out of these 1 out of 5, you now have 3 out of 5 chances that one's going to make it. Many biotechs on the NASDAQ have more than one indication moving so that shareholders will get a return on investment. You're not just gambling on a single, target. We saw what happened with companies, even like Acasti. Acasti had a single drug. When it failed in its phase 3, what happened? It's dead in the water. It has no other assets. You don't want that.
No, it's I think it's a very, very compelling situation right now for investors, especially at the current share price. Okay, Guy, on that note, I want to thank you and thank everybody for watching. We'll see you on the next live stream, hopefully with some news in the coming weeks.
Sounds very good.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jack.